Hey guys!
Hey guys, this is Michelle.
And Mark. This is Michelle and Mark.
This is the Mark and Michelle show.
It is. And tonight, it's like fourth episode or something?
Well, it doesn't matter really.
Okay, whatever. So anyway, it's an episode. We're
in the middle of talking about why autism is difficult. Last night we talked about physical reasons why, and tonight Mark is going to talk about mental reasons why.
Mm-hmm. And I'll let Michelle throw stuff in when she's ready. Anyway, let's just, hey, one viewer, and we're going to talk about mental difficulties in autism, right? And let's see here. Let's take a quick. Yeah. With the mental issues and the physical issues, let's see. And communication issues and social issues, those four, the social, mental, communicative, and physical, those are obvious. Those are things that you as caregivers can see. Mm-hmm. Hey, Marlo, how are you? And so they'll be obvious. When we get to the emotional ones, those aren't going to be so obvious. But we'll go into those.
Yeah, and a lot of those we didn't know were autism until he healed it.
True, until I recovered, and then we were like, oh, wait a minute.
Really interesting to watch happen.
Right. And hey, Amy, how are you? So let's start with hyperfocus. I think most of you know what hyperfocus is, but just a quick, brief definition. It is a very intense, ability to focus on whatever activity they're doing. And hyperfocus for me, I can't ever say that I used hyperfocus to hyperfocus to get a job done, to get a task done. What I used hyperfocus for was to de-stress, was to calm down, and I usually went off somewhere by myself to hyperfocus. And so hyperfocus for me was a de-stressing tool. I think that is also the case with most people with autism, but then it could be that others with autism are able to use their hyperfocus, are able to, what's the word?
Channel
there you go, good word. Channel it to complete a task or a chore. And so hyperfocus can be a problem because you can get lost in it. And man, God knows there's been times, especially in my 20s, when I hyperfocused so much that I forgot I had to be at work, forgot appointments. I was always running late because it was too easy to hyperfocus. And so hyperfocus can be a problem unless it's channeled correctly, like Michelle said.
You did, didn't you stay in a library like for hours and hours?
Yes, and while that was not so much detrimental, I used to live in Athens, Georgia. This was in my early 20s. I was 21, 22. And I lived there for about a year. And there were times when I loved music at that point. And what I mean is classical music, Baroque music, that type of stuff. And so Athens, Georgia is the home of the University of Georgia. Most of you know that. Some of you may not. And they had a wonderful music library. So there were times when I would get done at work, I would go to the music library and I would stay there until it closed at midnight. Then I'd go home and get some sleep. And if I didn't have to work until later the next day, I'd go back to the music library and stay there for hours until just reading through scores and stuff like that. And that was a serious hyperfocus. And reading history was also a serious hyperfocus. And so
we should show you our library at some point.
I know, right? But it's pared down from what it used to be years ago. But anyway, moving on to the next one. Let's go. We've already talked about the need for explicit instruction and communication.
And we'll cover that more in the communication section.
Exactly. I'm not going to go over that one. Here's a big one. The need for control. All right. You'll find autistic kids and autistic adults alike have a huge need for control in their lives. And having lived that from the inside, I'm going to tell you why I think that is and why it was true for me. When you can't read other people emotionally, or you can't read their body language, life is always unpredictable because you have no way of guessing what might be happening to you in the near future. And
in the seconds ahead.
In the seconds ahead, but even more so, an autistic brain has trouble recognizing the consequences of their actions. And because that's the case, a lot of times I didn't make the connection between what I was doing and what the consequences of what I was doing might be. And because of that, life always seemed unpredictable. And so I tried my best to control that to control what happened to me as much as possible. And for instance, I remember this is probably my I'd say so, late 30s, early 40s. And we were living in Atlanta still. Michelle came to me and she said, well, we're going somewhere today. And I melted down over that. And I said, no, I don't want to go anywhere. And I got mad. I just shut down and walked off. And she probably had told me the day before, and probably told me then the day before that. And because she knew I would get upset. Why? Because it broke my routine. So we'll move on. And I'm going to tie a few of these together. The need for control, the need for routine, and then another one, meltdowns from overstimulation. All three of those really kind of go together. The need for control really comes, I think, from not being able to read the events in your life and your interactions with others. The need for routine is a mechanism to try to control your life. I wanted routine. I only felt safe when I had a routine. It was impossible. Michelle is a person who kind of enjoys living, being ungrounded and flying by the seat of her pants. Now, when I was autistic, that drove me wildly insane.
It was pretty difficult.
And so, not her fault.
And if he did end up going with me, which he usually did, he would have his head buried in a book.
Exactly. Because then I didn't have to look at life that might be unpredictable. But then that made it unpredictable because I wasn't looking at it. I was buried in a book, right? And the need for control comes from not being able to comprehend life the way NTs do. It really does. And so the need for routine was necessary to feel safe and grounded. But then when the need for control was frustrated and my routine was broken or interrupted, then came the meltdowns from overstimulation. All right?
From what if this happened, or did you think like that? Did you have excessive worry about, I can't do this because this might happen or this might happen? Or
I always excessively worried. Right. And I always thought about life as like chess. If I make this move, what's going to happen? Except I didn't think about chess like chess. I just thought about life like chess. And so, but then because I tried to cover every eventuality in my head, so I would try, and I remember bragging one time, I can predict any eventuality. I remember telling you that.
Did you tell me that?
Yeah, long time ago. And boy, was I wrong. I tried to cover every eventuality that might happen. It just doesn't work that way. And what I realized during recovery is when emotions came on, they gave me a buffer to handle the unpredictability of life better. Because when I was autistic, I was nothing but like a raw nerve all the time. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. It was like a raw nerve all the time. Something always was getting on my last nerve, only because I had one and it was the last. So, and I really think if you look at your autistic loved ones that same way, they're a raw last nerve, and everything will set them off. It's not their fault. It's just that their body is constantly in fight or flight mode.
Right. So yesterday we talked about the severe hypoglycemia.
Yeah, exactly. And see, that severe hypoglycemic state contributes to the fight or flight mode all the time, right? And then it contributes to the need for control, a need for routine, and then when both of those needs get frustrated, meltdowns occur. Now, truthfully, as an autistic person, when I was autistic, my brain was definitely one-track minded. And it's only recently that I've been able to move away from the one-track mindedness by getting rid of the heavy metals. I really think that's the case.
Yeah.
And so now I don't get overwhelmed hardly anymore. But I had to do a lot of work, emotional work. I had to get rid of a lot of traumas using energy medicine, using forgiveness and forgiving other people, forgiving myself. EFT, a type of energy medicine. But I had to do a lot of mental and emotional work during recovery, because at each stage of recovery, which was every couple months or every 3 months or so, new emotions would come up, new trauma. Well, old traumas would surface, and I would have to skim those off and throw them out.
You told me today that you were starting to have memories of things that you didn't even know you had memories of.
Yeah, right. Well, a friend of mine at work, she and I were talking about sleepwalking. And I remembered that the girlfriend that I had before I met Michelle, she was a sleepwalker. And when my friend and I were talking about sleepwalking, I all of a sudden remembered a memory that I hadn't remembered since that happened. And I remembered a memory. There you go. And because that's how you do it. But she had come over to my place. She spent the night. She and I were sleeping. Sometime during the middle of the night, I think it was about 2 o'clock, 2:30, she gets up, and I didn't know she had a potentiality for sleepwalking. She gets up, and she just wore a nightgown. And so she gets up, and she walks through the house and walks out the front door, walks through the yard, and sits down on the curb out on the edge of the street. And I'm like, and I said to her, Betty, where are you going? She didn't hear me. And because I thought she was awake. So we get out. I follow her out to the curb. She sits down on the curb. I sit down there next to her. I didn't touch her. I don't really know why. I guess something told me not to, so I didn't. And because I think I remember hearing, well, her mother slept walk. So I figured that might be what it was. And so I didn't touch her. We sat there for 20 minutes in the dark, and her in her nightgown, and me in shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt. Finally, I hear, what are you doing? And I look over at her, not that I can see her, and I said, no, the question is, what are you doing? You got up out of the bed, walked out of the house, and you sat down on the curb, and we've been sitting here 20 minutes. We have? I said, yeah, come on, let's go back inside. And go back to bed. So we did.
So this is a memory that you have not had since it happened.
Because as I've recovered, sometimes that happens. Memories will come up that I haven't remembered since the memory was incurred. If that's a word.
That works.
It works. There you go. And so that one came up just a day or two ago. It might have been yesterday. And so it's been very fascinating. So recovery has been fascinating all the way around. It really has.
Yes.
It's just, it's been roller coaster up and down, but then it always turns out really good. You know,
Yes.
we have the best relationship we've ever had. So anyway, but more mental stuff since we're getting on meltdown, the need for control, the need for routine. Those are very strong needs. Also, another very strong need for autistic people is why. You know why there's a need for why? Is because the autistic brain isn't able to sense the implicit meaning behind things. And so it doesn't put together implicit meaning with explicit expression and just immediately pick up the why. It has to always be told. If I had $1, no. If I had a nickel for every time I said why, I would be a millionaire.
You'd be a 10 times.
I'd be 10xer. I'd be 10 times a millionaire because, and you all know this. Your kids have done this. Your adult loved ones who are on the spectrum have done this. They constantly ask why. Can you go do this?
Why?
And you have to explain. You have to be immediately ready with why, right? I don't have to do that anymore because I just know why. My brain, 2015, my brain started to put together social cues for the first time so that I knew why people did things without actually having to think about it. That was cool because then I go, oh, well, she did that because I remember years ago she said that, such and such, and so now that affects how she thinks now about such and such and her new relationships. That was cool. And I used to have to sit and analyze it to figure it out. But about 2015, January 2016, that winter, my brain started putting together all of that social information in a flash. And I remember mentioning that to you. And I thought that was so cool because I didn't have to ask and I didn't have to wonder why. My brain just put all the social information together and I knew why. So, all right, couple other things.
Could we go to need for control and how you've struggled to get out of that mindset?
Okay, need for control. The need for control was so strong in me, and it's probably equally as strong in your autistic loved ones, that I would police people in my brain. What I mean is, if I saw someone doing something wrong, I would go, see, and it would really gear me up. And I have spent, probably from the summer or fall of 2016 up until, what was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
Maybe 3.
Maybe 3 weeks
a little
ago.
bit ago.
Maybe 3 weeks ago, working on all the emotions around a need for control. And so about 3 weeks ago, I was finally able to do some energy medicine, EFT, and forgiveness work on all the emotions, feel the emotions through, and my need for control disappeared in a few minutes.
A completely different person.
Yes, but that neural network was so strong, I was angry that I couldn't get rid of it.
Well, because that one just didn't get healed. You had to energetically remove it.
Yes, and so that's how strong the need for control can be in your autistic loved ones. So was that a good enough answer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think that's it for tonight.
Okay. All right. Well, we can do that. And
tomorrow we'll be talking about emotional issues.
All right. Which are somewhat similar to mental, but not.
Definitely not.
Okay. She says definitely not. So we'll go with that. But anyway, tomorrow night, guys, be back here tomorrow night at the same time, 10:45 for our live. Continue on with the heavy metal detox smoothie
and the
celery juice because you will see huge improvements.
Okay. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
All right, bye-bye.